Fantasy as a genre definitely has its ups and downs, from big epic fantasy, urban fantasy, and everything in between, to even Conan-style fantasy. But what is the fundamental base of fantasy? The fundamental base of fantasy is J.R.R. Tolkien's Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit. Lord of the Rings is what is a quintessential fantasy series, and I want to talk to you today and explain why it's so important and why you should read it. So this is why you need to read The Lord of the Rings. Lord of the Rings is a high fantasy series by J.R.R. Tolkien that comprises 3 books: Fellowship of the Ring, Two Towers, and Return of the King. This is simple. Why do you need to read them? So, let's start. The first reason you need to read them, and one of the biggest, is that they've influenced everything to come after. Lord of the Rings has basically the backbone of every fantasy novel we have read in recent years, whether it YA fantasy or high fantasy of adult literature. It is the backbone of it in that form. Why there are other books that may have influenced, Lord of the Rings definitely is the bigger influence in my opinion. You feel this influence in people from Brandon Sanderson, Robert Jordan, and even people like Samantha Shannon with the god-awful Prior of the Orange Tree, Lord of the Rings with Lesbians. You literally see this influence of these books throughout time from the moment they were written. These books have set the standard, and you cannot deny that. They have also works of great English literature. They draw upon myths, legends, Celtic, Welsh myths, Irish folklore, fairy tales of the British Isles, even Nordic myths pull through, and European myths as well. These draw upon this history of these storytellers and bring it through into these books. Lord of the Rings is this epic, expansive series that will keep you reading from start to finish. They are stunning. They are works of beautiful writing. The poise, the sentence structure, the use of English is just to die for. Lord of the Rings has set those standards. They are dark, intriguing, fun, light, and that's what I love about them. You read them, and the wave of emotions that come through, the wave of the tones of these books where chapters need to be dark and intense, and it just works. They also have fantastic and iconic characters that we all know in some form or another, whether we've only really aware of the Lord of the Rings film or some meme off Tumblr. The characters of Lord of the Rings are diverse and rich and hilarious and scary and everything in between. They are phenomenal. When it comes to Lord of the Rings, I don't think anyone will ever topple this benchmark of great fantasy writers. Lord of the Rings and its world around it is amazing. I mean, The Hobbit, being a children's book, has very little to do with the Lord of the Rings, other than one magic ring and a little trickle part of some characters, but the story is not cohesive to the Lord of the Rings, unlike where they bookended those films in, and the Hobbit movies were terrible. On the other side of it, you have countless books that not only take you into this world in a deep sense, but you can get lost in it. You have the Silmarillion is the true prequel to the Lord of the Rings, and that should have been made into a film long ago, but they never will. You have this expansive, brilliant world, the world building, the characters, the lore, the languages. These books you can get lost in for hours and are stunning. I cannot tell you enough how much you need to read The Lord of the Rings, because if you are a fantasy fan and you have not read them, shame on you, and that's my honest to God opinion. Let's just leave you with this note. You can get The Lord of the Rings digitally on any ebook format you choose. They're also available gorgeous ebooks read by Christopher Lee, and they are countlessly available in endless editions imaginable. They've been published many, 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 many times in different editions. Lord of the Rings is my personal favourite, and why it was not my gateway drug into fantasy, that was Aragon, when I was 13, it was definitely the books that showed me how epic and the scope of fantasy can be. So, go out there today and buy the Lord of the Rings. Just read them, or listen to them, on whatever you want, or get them from your library, if they're open. So, as always, my name is Will, I'm the Board Book Geek, and tell me what you think in the comments below. Bye.